we could actually stay connected to the natural systems, to the ecosystems that support our life, and have a regenerative impact. We could go beyond sustainability. We have the power to have a positive footprint. Hey guys, this is Mike with Symbiosis, and we are a permaculture company that helps to design and install resilient properties, homesteads, farms, helping people live regeneratively in Central Texas. We're out in Brenham, Texas today on a property that we've designed and been working hard to install. So we've been out here for, gosh, I guess about 4 or 5 months now working on this property. And we've installed a pond, we've done berms and swales, we've planted 126 trees, nearly 200 berries, we've installed a constructed stream bed, we've felled a bunch of trees that were no longer alive that were standing. These used to be post oak trees, and so we're going to use these logs for seeding around the property and various other little projects, and firewood of course.
Hey, I'm Ariel. I'm a project manager for Symbiosis, and my job is to turn designs into reality and turn desires into reality. We do carpentry, we do stonework, we do irrigation, we do, just grab a shovel, grab an axe and go. So it's never the same thing every day, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it a lot.
My name is Cheryl Davis. I am the heavy equipment operator, and I'm also in charge of the maintenance division. Started working for Mike at Symbiosis, installing berms and swales and catching rainwater and planting trees. We've planted a lot of trees, so feeling pretty good about that, and also wanted to just set an example for my children and for all of the children out there that you can go into business that's regenerative and good for the earth instead of the alternative.
I'm Justin Gruno, and I'm a team lead for Symbiosis. I've been working with the company for about 2 years. Pretty much everything that we like to do with Symbiosis is about integrating these different systems. So right next to the home here, we have a garden that is growing herbs, kitchen herbs like rosemary and thyme. And we also have a mixture of flowering and pollinating plants that will be attracting butterflies and bees and hummingbirds, just to add to the overall beauty and resilience of this system here. And if we can combine the vining and the flowering plants with providing shade for the house at the same time, that kind of cuts to the chase of what our company does.
The constructed stream bed over here, they had a major drainage issue behind their barn dominium, and so what was happening was it was staying like a muddy swamp pretty much all year round, but especially in the wet months, of course, not so much in summer. So we've got the water now channeled in this constructed stream bed, and we've got the gray water coming off of the barn dominium also coming into this. And we're still finishing the stonework, but eventually this is going to look like a nice natural stream bed, and it's going to be planted out with a ton of pollinators, and there's just going to be hummingbirds and butterflies and amphibians galore. And it's also going to filter that water, and then once that water coming from the seep spring behind the barn dominium, if this overflows like in a large rain event, then that cleaner water is going to make its way down into the pond, which is behind y'all right now. And then into the berms and swales, and then into the irrigation pond, which we can then pump back up into the tank. And then if the tank overflows, that goes back into the pond. So all of the water that hits this side of the property is controlled and gets used multiple times before it leaves the property. And if you look down here, you can see some of our irrigation system. We've got a main line that runs in this trench right here, which follows the road essentially, and that connects the pond and the rain tank. And then we've got our irrigation valve coming off of that main line. And so this is what's gonna run this whole section for the riparian trees that we planted around the pond. So that's stuff like bald cypress, things like cottonwood, and sycamore, stuff like that, that wants a lot of water. So we've got an irrigation system, but also it's going to get extra water from the pond because we planted it pretty close to the pond. So we have a 20,000 gallon Pioneer rain tank, and that's my favorite kind of rain tank to use. It comes with a 20-year warranty. It does have a plastic liner inside of it, but none of the chemicals from the plastic get into the water. They've done a lot of tests on that, and so like in Australia, where actually if you build a home you have to put rainwater catchment on it, this is the tank that most people use, and it's made in Australia, kind of a leader in rainwater catchment technology. I'll show you some of the plumbing over here. So this tank has 3 different inflows on it. It has the inflow, which is on the other side of the tank, that comes from the barn over there, which it catches the water off of. And that's enough to fill this tank up easily, but because it's the main source of irrigation for the whole property, we wanted to have redundancy, we wanted to have backups. So when this 20,000 gallons of rainwater gets down to 3,000 gallons, or wherever we set the pressure transducer to, then this will start to fill up from the pond, which is all the way down there, and that's on a solar powered lift pump. And so this is the pond water inlet. So that's going to keep this full in the event that we run out of rainwater. And then if that pond gets down to a certain depth, I believe we're setting it at 8 feet. So we'll pump 7 feet of water out of it, which is over 200,000 gallons of water that we have to back up the 20,000 gallons of rainwater. Then if we run out of that water, based on a really long drought or dry spell or evaporation, then we have the well inflow, which is also set on a pressure transducer. So if this tank stops getting filled up by the pond, then it'll get down to 2,000 gallons. That pressure transducer will sense it, and it will start to keep this tank full at that level from the well, which I think will be a pretty rare event that we'll need that. But having that triple water redundancy in a place like Texas, where we do get long, hot, dry spells, is really ideal. So I'm pretty excited about this system. I think it's pretty neat. We've got our pump house, which is almost complete, right over here. So we've run power over here. This is not solar powered. It didn't make sense to, based on how close the power was. It just wasn't pragmatic to do that. So it runs on the main power line, and we've got our big pressure tank there. That actually kind of insulates the pump from turning on and off too much. So the thing that kills your water pump over time is it turning on and off a whole lot. And so the bigger your pressure tank is, the less often your pump has to turn on. So that's why we've got this huge pressure tank in here to make the life of that pump as long as possible. And then we've got our overflow. So this is when the tank is full of rainwater and it rains again, and you might have 10,000 gallons of water coming out of this tank. So it's got a big 6-inch overflow pipe right there. And it's interesting, actually, if you look at this, you would think, as soon as the water gets up to this level, it's going to start letting it out. But actually, this elbows inside of the tank and goes up higher. So the water doesn't actually start to come out of here. You have to imagine it's like a cup sitting in there. So the water has to rise up and then fall back in to this pipe, and then it comes down. And we're going to extend this out once we're done with our plumbing and electrical work here. And we're going to send it right into that berm. And then before it can leave the property, it goes into a series of about 5 more berms. And then it gets culverted across the road, goes through 2 more berms on the other side of the road, and then it's directed into our main irrigation pond. So any overflow from this tank has to take a pretty long, circuitous route before it can leave the property. Whereas before we did this design and this installation work, all the water was just shooting into the creeks and right off of the property and causing a lot of erosion. One of the cool things about the system that I forgot to mention when we were up there is that the irrigation controller that we selected has a local weather station, which is attached to a post right over here. So it's actually going to read what the temperatures are, how much rain is falling and all this different data, and that's going to affect how much water we pump out into the field. So it's going to have real-time data monitoring, and then it's going to adjust how much water we give to the trees based on that. So you don't have to worry about, getting a big rain and then watering your trees again needlessly or overwatering, and you don't have to worry about shutting the system off in a freeze, because it's going to sense that and it's going to shut the system off for you. There is, when we get a little further back, I'll show you another cool thing about the water system. So it's a combination of not just the irrigation work where we use pipes to put things, to move water around and give you control of your watering system, but also the installation of the earthworks, using the roads as water catchment features as well, thinking of a road like a roof, and really thinking of the whole property and the groundwater beneath it as a giant rainwater catchment system as well. So not only are we catching water on the surface, but we're also catching water in the soil, and we're building up the carbon and the organic matter so that that soil can hold more water. So one of the things that I love to do when we first start a design, I look at what's the water holding capacity of this soil based on the USDA soil data. And a lot of times it's like, this soil can only hold 2 inches of water based on the amount of organic matter in it. Okay, well, we know that that's our starting point. Now, in 5 years, how much water can this soil hold? And the whole name of the game there is adding carbon, organic matter, essentially dead plant material and manure, getting that down into the soil and making it more spongy and less inert, more alive. That pond up there, the spillway came down here, and then it went straight behind me and down into the secondary creek on the property, which feeds directly into the main creek. And there was this big pit opening up where the erosion, the water was dropping off and creating so much force that it dug a hole that's about 4 feet wide and about 4 feet deep. And that happened while we were working out here. So it was going to get worse really fast. So what we did was we extended this spillway and we carried the water over this little dip in the landscape and down into our series of berms and swales, and then into the pond that we installed at the bottom of this secondary creek before it hits the main creek. And we've got loquat trees and elderberries, and we have Arizona cypress and Montezuma cypress trees planted over here, which are beautiful trees. They can live for about 2,000 years. They love lots of water, really high quality lumber, really awesome little seed balls. They're little globes, and you can drop those in water and make a cleaning solution with them. They've got that nice piney essence, but they're also deciduous, which is why it's called a bald cypress. So down here we built this half-acre pond, and it is about 15 feet deep, a little less than 15 feet deep. And you can see that we have left the edges around the pond bare, because we're actually going to come in and plant pond plants in there and create an ecosystem and habitat so that we can build up the food chain in the pond and eventually support fish that are large enough for people to eat. So it was a lot of fun to build this pond. I enjoyed the process. It's kind of amazing to see something go from an open field that looks very similar to everything else on the property, and then to become this permanent water feature and see it fill up when we get a big rain. We also really take the time to seed and cover the dam wall, because it is disturbed soil and it's highly prone to erosion. So if you don't do that, a couple things can happen. You can get a lot of really undesirable stuff growing on there, those pioneer species that move in that are going to be spikier and more aggressive and harder to get rid of than the species that kind of come in after that succession point. And also you're going to have a lot of erosion, so water falling on the top of the dam wall and then coming down that slope is going to create these erosion channels, and it can actually destabilize your dam wall, and it can eventually cause the pond to blow out. which is a worst case scenario event that we want to avoid, right? So we make sure to establish that ground cover, and then the other thing is you really want to keep trees from growing on your dam wall long term, because the roots get down there and they create these channels of organic matter, and the water can follow those channels and essentially go through your dam wall, and you want that to be a close to impervious barrier to water, at least a very slowly transmitting layer. And we always use a roller when we're building ponds as well to help get that level of compaction that really makes the pond hold water, it really makes it last. So again, it's about a half-acre pond, about 15 feet deep, holds about 500,000 gallons of water, so almost 500,000 gallons of water storage created here. And the whole process only took about 2 weeks to actually install the pond. So this little innocuous pipe sticking out of the ground here is actually a very key component in the overall design, because this is where we are going to have our solar pump and solar powered pump. And so we're going to be pulling water out of that pond using the energy falling on the solar panels. It's a DC or direct current system, so there's no battery. So it's only going to pump when we need water in that tank and when it's daytime. And so this water is going to be pumped about 40 feet uphill, which is a pretty serious amount of lift when you start to get into the calculations for how big your pipes need to be and how powerful your pump needs to be. But we've designed this in such a way that we don't need a really huge solar array, we don't need batteries, and we don't need a very big pump, because we just need to fill that tank up slowly over the course of a day up to a certain number of gallons, which is enough to run the irrigation system for one cycle at night. So there was a lot of precision design that went into it, and then this is going to be a really key component that makes sure that we can use this 500,000 gallons of water to irrigate and also fertilize or fertigate all of the things that we've planted on this property in this overall master plan design. And over here we have another key component of the pond that is often overlooked. It's the spillway. And so when this pond is full, which it is right now, and we get more rain, this is where that water is going to exit the pond. And so we actually made sure that this is pretty flat all the way across. So if we're getting a major flood event, this water can exit the pond in a very wide, shallow stream instead of a narrow, deep, or more channelized, more powerful, more forceful stream. And that's to help prevent erosion here over time, because we really want this pond to last beyond our lifetimes, hundreds if not thousands of years. So we went ahead and make a nice wide level spillway, and then we put down some bull rocks. So you can see those rocks right here on the ground. It's a medium-sized rock, and we press that down into the earth here. So those are stabilized into the ground and they're locking into each other. And then we put some seed down, and then we put a mixture of compost and decomposed granite, which is rich enough to grow, but dense enough to pack in between those bull rock stones. And so when this is all said and done, and everything has sprouted up here, and we have some nice grasses and wildflowers and swamp milkweed, this is going to be stable biologically because the roots are going to hold it all together. And then we also create a butterfly sanctuary because we used a lot of different kinds of milkweed here and utilize that extra moisture that this area gets to grow some plants that really want some extra water. Help you to better understand how to live a more regenerative lifestyle. There's a way that anyone can participate, and really we need everyone to participate in order to reach this critical mass of having a regenerative society.